Adam Booker, Joe Ricci in the chair with me, Amos Murphy, for this one. Straight into it, fellas. Manchester City won, Tottenham Hotspur, or Tottenham, to piss off the Premier League broadcast. I don't know if you saw that little news article in the week. Nil. Adam, we spoke yesterday on the preview show. We said it could be anything. I kind of wasn't expecting a Man City clean sheet and just the one goal, if I'm being totally honest.
No, I mean, there was very obvious signs from basically halftime onwards that the collapse was coming, the much expected collapse. And to be honest, I felt that way until probably the last kick of the game, that the collapse was going to come eventually. I mean, the last kick of the game was essentially almost the collapse when Sarr put that header over the bar after the ridiculous VAR check that we had.
Yeah,
Which we'll
I
come
don't
on
know
to,
if
of
we could
course.
have. This is jumping the gun right to the end. That to me would have felt like 2023 when City conceded at Old Trafford when the Rashford offside. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think I could have been pissed off if the collapse came then. But everything before that, it felt like it was going to come, and it didn't.
right. But what you could say about that is the game should have been home and
yes.
hosed for both teams. Like
Yeah.
Spurs should have run away with it, and City should have run away with it, both on separate occasions. But you have to give credit to City that Ederson made big saves when he needed to. Kusanov made big tackles when he needed to. Gavardiol made big tackles when he needed to. Mateus Nunes was tidy and composed when he needed to. And there was a lot of City reactions to moments of distress that were unfamiliar in a really positive way.
Yeah. Joe, before we get onto specifics, just sort of overall feeling after that game, for me, it was, and this is so easy to say after the full-time whistle, and it's been +3. But as that collapse felt like it was going to come for City, I was gearing myself to say exactly the same point, but maybe with a little bit more of a negative spin on it. For me, I said it yesterday, this game, you go into it, it is a must-win, and it kind of doesn't matter how you arrive there just because of how bad Spurs are and just because of what City have done this season in terms of, not being able to see out wins, etc. So we can get into the nitty-gritty of it, and I'm sure we'll all have sort of separate points to pick up on. But the fact it is a win, just in isolation, after the last couple of weeks, I think is, a massive positive.
100%. We talked about it earlier in the day about, going into some of these games, it feels like maybe there's not the emotions going into some of these quote unquote Big Six matches the rest of the season where it's just been such an odd campaign. And even, to kind of touch upon Adam's point, I wasn't really feeling that high or that low at any point. I felt like Spurs were going to come back. And if they did, they did. If they didn't, great. But at the end of the day, I think this game and every game the rest of the season is just pick up a result and try to stay healthy, because at the end of the day, the Premier League's not going to yield anything other than ideally a place in the Champions League next season for City. And, you're talking maybe a couple matches left in the FA Cup. So, 3 points, a clean sheet, full fitness, I think a handful of really, really quality performances. It may not have been pretty in the second half, and yes, it probably should have been 3, maybe 4-0 at half, but I have nothing to complain about when you zoom out and say, hey, City just jumped, back up into fourth and are now a point off a third with a team that they're playing in a week.
Can I? Yes, spot on. But they're also, not that this is necessarily with the intention of catching them, but Arsenal dropped points again. They're 7 points behind Arsenal, who had happened to be 13 behind Liverpool, who, granted, Liverpool have played a game more, but say, for example, they were to lose that, Arsenal were to win the game in hand that they have on Liverpool, that'd still be 10 points. So we're talking 11 games left, and Arsenal, potential title candidates, potential title favourites at the start of the season, are closer to City than the other league leaders.
Yeah, obviously they've had their fair share of serious injuries as of late, but they were never contenders in my eyes. I mean, when you really buckle down and get to this part of the season, you watch them the last few months and you never think they look even remotely comfortable in any game. They squeeze out a load of results. You have to give it to them. But Liverpool, when they won their title, City, when they won 5 of the last 6, it was because they spent so many days winning comfortably, and they could rest throughout the season, and they could, it wasn't emotional distress from minute 1 to minute 90, where it seems to be that way with Arsenal. So on the flip side, you can say that Liverpool still haven't won a title race.
I think we're taking the small wins, and that is certainly one of them. Adam, stick with you because that first half, at times, back at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, was scintillating, wasn't it? A real sort of swashbuckling Harlem Globetrotter at times. First half, you look across that front line. Obviously, Doku, the standout man in terms of City's attackers, but even Savinho, Erling Haaland, Omar Mamouche as well, having so much fun against, it has to be said, a Tottenham defence that probably wouldn't have looked out of place in a Sunday League game. Organisation, no. Sort of any application in terms of recognising the game state, no. Incredibly high line, yes. But at the same time, we've seen City come up against dodgy defences this season and not really taken most of it. So, granted, it was only the one goal. It should have been much more, but it was good to see City capitalise on their opponent's weaknesses for once, as opposed to the opponent capitalising on City's.
Yeah, and we've spoken all season about how City's forwards, whether it's their attacking midfielders or wingers or so on and so forth, they're just not as clinical as they used to be in seasons past. And had they been a bit more clinical in that first half, I think they probably would have had minimum 3 goals at the break. But yeah, that first half was the absolute ceiling of what this team can be, and I don't mean that City's ceiling is scoring one goal in the midst of 4 or 5 big chances, but in terms of the wingers taking their men on and Holland finding space and getting a bit more control from Nico Gonzalez and Ruben Diaz and Kusanov being able to manage any sort of threat in behind, it really was the ceiling of what this team can be on their day. And then you fast forward to the second half, and we got the floor. We got the perfect encapsulation of the Jekyll and Hyde that is City this season.
Yeah. I want to keep it positive, Joe, on that first half, because
Sorry.
you are talking. Yeah, it's the theme of the season, but we've got to ride the positive wave whilst we can. Joe, you are talking margins between a 1-0 and a 3-0, really, aren't you? And you might put it down in the case of Erling Haaland's second chance, definitely. Also, Savinho's sort of missed chance, both off Doku passes. That maybe bad finishes. I think the Savinho, first glance, you think, oh, that's a howler, but you see the replay and actually it sort of fizzed at him at quite a trajectory. He kind of kicks it into the ground. You've seen them sort of nestle into the roof of the net. In fact, I think there was one at the weekend, a player scored, sort of kicking it into the ground. Can't remember. Anyway, you're talking margins. City going back to the time the sort of were in this rut that started out from losing a couple of games against Spurs, really struggled to create and really struggled to find the sort of feet in the attacking third. That didn't seem to be the case in the first half. Again, maybe it's because of the way Spurs were set up, but you've got to play to your opposition's weaknesses, and they certainly did.
Yeah, I think, looking at obviously that Spurs lineup and the way that they've played under Postecoglou, I think we all expected it to be a fairly open match, and it certainly was. I think Doku and Savinho were getting everything and anything that they wanted off their fullbacks. I thought Savinho has had a really good interplay with or interchange with his midfielders or overlapping fullbacks. Again, today maybe it didn't yield anything in the goals and assist tally, but you can see something building there. And I think, the other flank with Doku, I mean, from minute 1, he really carried on the form from Liverpool of beating his first man. I think today the difference was he was far more clinical with his final ball. Obviously, the opener, yes, there was a bit of deflection, but you have to get in the position to make a pass to have the opportunity for a deflection. And then, a couple more. I think the Savinho one, I mean, yes, it came in. It was a whipped in ball, but it had to be to take out the defenders and not, have Vicario come out and take it. So I think that's something that Savinho will improve on. Again, he's obviously still young, like Doku, like so many of the others in today's lineup, but I think there were plenty of positives to take out of those two in particular. Haaland, it's been a weird season for him. He started out in blistering form, on and off with some niggles here and there, and then it's felt like he's still done enough to keep up with the goals, but if this is his debut campaign and the treble season, he probably has another 8 to 10 goals to his name, in my opinion, just throughout the season. So I think that's one thing to keep an eye on. The one thing I was trying to focus on was Marmoush's involvement, with having Holland back and, really playing kind of that 10 role rather than off the left supporting him. And I thought he was okay, but I think he showed a lot of promise.
I can't remember.
I think he maybe played a part in the build up to the goal, but maybe it wasn't influential as such. It wasn't his most involved game.
He wasn't really, if you look back to his Frankfurt days, which obviously weren't that long ago, this felt like a game that he should have been feasting on with passes in behind and balls over the top, and none of those really took place either because our wingers were so involved. So I think on another day, had he played off the left, maybe he would have been more involved. I think it's just that adjustment period of him figuring out his role and adjusting to these different schemes.
Yeah, certainly. Like the Liverpool game, I don't necessarily want to put too much blame. It's not really blame at all, but you can understand why he's maybe had a blistering start, especially in those home matches, and has kind of struggled a little bit to find his form in the matches that have come. Adam, just on the poor finishing, because it's a funny sport. We're sat here sort of laughing it off as sort of a bit of a novelty, but Haaland's save at I think it was Vicario's feet, and obviously the Savinho chance, which again I maintain, I haven't watched it back, wasn't necessarily gilt edge as such, but when you're in that position in front of goal, you need to score. Very almost cost City, so maybe we would have been having a much different conversation.
Yeah, and early on in City's poor run, in I guess it would have been late October, early November, this was a theme where they would have like 20 or 30 good minutes and take no chances. They wouldn't create nearly as much as they did tonight, but the chances they did create, they wouldn't take, and they would get punished for it. But yeah, I think, with the likes of Doku, with the likes of Savinho, they'll get better at that in time. Haaland's just, he's one of those players. It's crazy because I think Haaland is a streaky player. It's just that when he's in a streak of scoring, he scores so many that it kind of masks the maybe 2 or 3 week streaks where he feels maybe a little rusty and some chances that he should be taking, he doesn't. And I don't necessarily mean that as a dig in any way, because he'll still finish every season with 25, 30 goals in all competitions easily.
That's 3 consecutive over 20 in the Premier League, which is continues to disrespect the establishment in that sense.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Rory. But so yeah, I don't know. I don't want to complain about it because City go on and win the game, but they didn't go on and win the game because they took their chances. They went on and won the game because they made last-ditch tackles, last-ditch saves, and Spurs fluffed their lines as much as City did in the first half.
Can we maybe make a treble comparison in the sense that season we would say if City can't find a way to score 2, 3, 4 goals, they would find a way not to concede one. And it wasn't as assured as that, but maybe Adam, it was the closest we've seen.
I get the comparison. The difference was in the treble season, if we got into this pattern of play where City weren't creating much or taking many chances, they could pass the ball around in a circle and just smother an opposition, and Grealish out on the left, Rodri in the middle, Foden or Bernardo out on the right, and just stink the place out for 30 minutes and kill a game. Those teams didn't just survive, whereas City last night, they just survived. It's not, and that's not a sustainable thing. I mean, if you play consecutive halves of football surviving the way that City did last night in the second half, you're gonna concede eventually.
Interesting.
I'm also wondering though, because I agree with your point, but in the context of this season and everything that's gone on with City for the negative, I'm wondering if
it's still a huge improvement.
But this is going to sound stupid, but I'm almost wondering if this is actually a quote-unquote better result than the 4-0 against Newcastle in the context of, hey, we had a squeaky bum time and we pulled it out. 4-0 was great, but then...
What'd you pull out of your bum?
Don't you worry about it. That's for the bonus episode. But
we're going to get a Patreon.
So I think that 1-0, and I'm sure you guys might have something off the top of your head. I can't think of another result in the last 3-4 months where it's been so tight towards the end and City have actually held on to a result. Again, could it have been 3-0, 4-0? Yes, but I think you can take more out of this for the rest of this season only than you will a 4-0 against Newcastle.
Yeah, you're right. It's mostly been either you blow the opposition away or you get blown away.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been much in between.
Which was the result that Leicester. That was the last time we've kind of seen City ride a bit of a wave and get over the line. But you talk about a team who are going to go down to the Championship. And granted, Tottenham Hotspur are...
Not far off.
Yeah, we're talking like 2 steps up from that in terms of the league table. But Heung-min Son, Dejan Kulusevski, Mateus Tel, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they are much better players than what Leicester have put forward. So
and Leicester was still 2-0.
Small,
So.
Yeah, true. They did. Well, City did find the second goal in this one. For me, anyway, it was just remarkably ruled out. Adam, I think we need to give him his own section because the masses are pandering to it. We'll have Ofcom on our backs if we don't. But Jeremy Doku was fantastic, specifically in that first half, and maybe answered some of the critics that I had of him at the weekend. I still think there's question marks over certain parts of his game, but a positive step forward from him.
Yeah, he was great, and he should have had probably 2 more assists. I know we didn't count officially they didn't count the assist for the lone goal.
Yeah, it feels harsh that he didn't get an assist in this game.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it wasn't that far off from a regular Jeremy Doku performance. 1 or 2 better balls. That was it. From a regular Doku performance. The thing that I really try not to engage with the football Twitter fans that will tweet at us and DM us during the game and say, "Look, Doku did something. Are you going to talk about that on your podcast?" and whatever else. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Jeremy Doku getting a deflected assist means that he didn't come into the night with 44% of his goal contributions in 2 years coming in 1 game. I'm not going to pretend the last 2 years didn't happen where he didn't do anything that he did tonight for 2 seasons, essentially. So I have long said that Jeremy Doku is having an end product away from being world class. I don't have an agenda against him. I don't have an agenda for anybody else. I want Jeremy Doku to succeed because he's a Manchester City player.
It's almost like you support the team.
Yeah, it's a crazy concept, Amos. That I'm not just sitting in my mom's basement in the middle of fucking Midwest America poring over XG analysis sheets and pretending like I understand what it means to support a football club. I want him to succeed because he's a City player, and I have criticisms of him because I have a platform to do so within reason. It's as simple as that. He was fine tonight. He should have had 1 or 2 more assists. That wasn't his fault. And if he has end product, he'll be elite. He'll be world class. Right now, he doesn't have that. And so, therefore, he's not.
And I think, I struggle with Doku because he's young, which you should say, okay, give him time, which I would say. But he's also an injury-prone player, so he's not really allowed the time or giving himself the time to get into a run. So maybe if he stays fit and he's a mainstay in the starting 11, this final ball becomes something that we want it to be.
And he gets to know the plays much better, and he can sort of understand the movement of Haaland.
Yes, 100% for him to be the guy on the wing. I mean, the left wing's open. Go ahead and take it, Jeremy. It's yours. If you want it. And I think
we love comparing him to Grealish. Here's a great comparison for you. Both of them can't play fucking 90 minutes without sitting down and rubbing their hamstrings. So maybe they're as similar as we maybe they're similar more than they are different.
Yeah, and again, he's got all the tools. I mean, I said it, I think it was you and I, Amos, last season, right after his debut, I said, to me, he's the player with the most upside in the entire squad. Everybody. I said that, and I stood and somewhat stand by it that he can get wherever he wants on the pitch. There's very few players in world football who can say the same thing. Now, once you get there, you got to do something with it, and that's a lot to ask. But if you can even get a 50% improvement on what he's doing, you're talking about a world-class player. So again, it's there for the taking. It's up to him to stay fit, and obviously the coaching staff to help him with it. But I think at this point we just have to kind of see what the rest of the season has in store. And again, he could walk into next season as the starting left winger. It really wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. More of this. And look, I know we're sort of throwing our criticisms into the ring here. Fantastic against Spurs, but the game state, let's not pretend the game state didn't absolutely perfectly set up for him. At the weekend, really good at getting past Trent Alexander-Arnold, but he had probably, in my opinion, the best centre-half partnership in the world, blocking his crosses, and that's understandable. Against Spurs, well, the invisible man was sort of stood there, getting in the way of it. And again, reiterate, should have had more rewards than he did. That'll do for part one. We'll be back after this quick break. Stay exactly where you are. Welcome back to the City Ramble. Some 3-word reviews, as is always the case at this part of a review show. Jacob says, over the line. Denzel Trotter says, corrupt officials again. Joe Oliver says, fucking brilliant win. Sam Citizen White says, a champagne Kusanova. Like it. We've got Citizen Far Away saying, a season of suffering and suffer we did, all part of the process. It sounds like a little bit of a poem. Not quite 3 words, but we'll take it. Graham looked miles better. Martin Hoban, still like Kusanov. Adam Booker, if this is Kusanov playing out of his depth, what does it look like when he's reached his potential?
Yeah, maybe the comparisons we've made to one John Stones in the last 72, 48 hours are not that hyperbolic. He was great. I mean, dare I say, he's having already a Ruben Diaz style impact as Ruben Diaz did back in the COVID season when he was brought in. You know, obviously everyone talks about that. I think it was 5-2 at home to Leicester. That game that kind of sparked the Ruben Diaz deal getting sped up. Obviously they were, you know, in negotiations for Kalidou Koulibaly and a couple other players, but I think he's having that level of an impact now. Now, obviously, the difference is Ruben Diaz's impact took City to a Champions League final. They won the league by, 15 odd points. That's not the kind of impact Kusanov's going to have. But in terms of coming in and being a player that single-handedly can rescue bona fide international players, his teammates that give him a bad back pass or get caught over the top or have a missed tackle in midfield and he's got to clean things up. I mean, he's doing that at 20. We've joked all the time about how he doesn't speak the language and he's probably just sitting there in his own world, like speaking to himself in
does he need to learn English? Like,
I know.
It's just Uzbeki and vibes at this point.
Let me tell you why he needs
should
to learn
learn
English,
Uzbeki and
because
talk to him.
he's a fucking future captain. That's why.
There you go. Joe, Pep Guardiola said on Abdou Kadir Kusanov, and that, by the way, is one of those names where, as someone who speaks for a living, when you nail it, and I probably haven't nailed it, there's probably some sort of different pronunciation in Uzbeki, but when you get the syllables and you get the sort of the vowels rolling off the tongue is really satisfying. So I'll go again. Abdou Kadir Kusanov. This was Pep Guardiola's comments. What I like is he's already incredibly light in the Man City dressing room. Today he travelled with no wash bag, no nothing. He arrives to play football, and when you talk to him, he just laughs all the time. It's like we've just signed Luke Barsley to play at centre half. No wash bag, no nothing. He just arrives, turns up, English. And when it comes from a far away land, also known as Glossop, and when you talk to him, he just laughs. I mean, I'd take Luke Barsley as captain. I think he'd do a great job.
Yeah, I'm gonna refrain from making he's a better captain than Kyle Walker joke, but yes, I think Kusanov has quickly become a fan favorite for a lot of reasons, but for me, the biggest thing is just I personally have already forgotten the Chelsea incident. I know some in the media like to keep referencing it, but that is such a thing of the past that for some it honestly could have changed the trajectory of their top flight career. I could probably be too hyperbolic about his performances, but when you take into consideration the language barrier, the change of league, the change of country, the change of play style, the shambolic defense that he came into, being partnered with a midfielder slash left winger playing right back today, covering him. I mean, you're asking a lot out of anybody, let alone a 20-year-old who just moved from France. So uh, to me, it's 10 out of 10 so far. And again, I'm going to try to temper expectations a little bit, but I don't think you could have asked for a better start by any means.
Adam, deep breath, because again, we don't want to do that sort of thing that people do when a new signing comes in and you start gassing them up.
He's the
Eloquent
next
Mangala.
Maldini. Just say it. Just say it.
Okay, so two centre backs whose surnames begin with MA, Maldini and Mangala. I think it's safe to say opposite ends of the spectrum there, but you don't want to do that sort of thing where you get carried away. But the raw materials are there. This isn't a flash in the pan. This isn't, look, you don't, I mean, barring and touch wood, it doesn't happen, horrific injury. He isn't going to lose that pace for the best part of 10 years. You know, that is natural that he's got that. His passing, okay, maybe there's a situation where he's fluking 98 passes in a game against the best the best team in the Premier League. I've not got the numbers for the Spurs game, but I assume it's higher. You know, the point I'm getting at, the defensive awareness as well, that isn't stuff you can just fluke in what is now a decent enough sample size. So get excited because it looks like the kid's a talent.
Yeah, and you also can't fluke it in a team that's so dysfunctional. And to be fair, maybe this isn't a coincidence. In a few of the games that he's played in, I don't know how many starts he's made at this point. It's got to be 5 or less. But a few of the games that he started in, City have looked more functional than they have at other times this season.
Yeah.
But to do that in a largely dysfunctional team, without Rodri, with the fact that he's not playing alongside the same person every game because all of his partners get injured or they're constantly chopping and changing. And yeah, I mean, it's fucking loud ass truck. Hang on.
I can't hear it if it helps.
It's extremely impressive for a player at his age to come in and hit the ground running like this. I already made the Ruben Diaz comparison and I'll stick with it because yeah, he's got all the makings of a player that's going to be in the team. Look, we don't want to do this whole thing where he's at West Ham in 3 years, but at the moment he looks like he has all the makings to be in the team for a long, long time.
Yeah, and it just sort of reiterates that point so many people were making at the time, that get them in now and play them now, because Joe, I don't think had things not gone as bad for City this season, say, whatever the gap between being semi-comfortable for top 4 and not being in a title race would have been, I don't think Guardiola is necessarily giving these players as much game time. With Kusanov, maybe it's different because, you know, the age-old question from this season is, if not him, who else? Because there isn't, apart from Nathan Ake, who's sort of, at this point, put together with plasticine. I'm not quite sure who else there is to play. But, Mamouche, for example, there are players who could be doing that position. Jack Grealish is sat on the bench, not getting any game time. The fact that, and Nico Gonzalez as well, another example. The fact that Guardiola is giving these players minutes for me is encouraging for 2 reasons. It's helping them develop and it's helping them understand the teammates, get up to speed with Premier League football. But it's also a sign that this is the rebuild in full process. This we're not waiting till the summer. These are the players that he sees or the club sees for the next, decade, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty telling when you look at the last 2 games in particular, the amount of appearances that are on the bench. Today it was Gundogan and De Bruyne who didn't even come on. Gundogan did in the 90th minute, but barely featured. Bernardo Silva off the bench. Phil Foden, granted he's much more of the longer term player, but off the bench. It seems like Pep is, in the last week and a half in particular, not afraid to say, these are the guys that I want to go with for the rest of the season, and until you prove me otherwise, that's who he's going to stick with. And I know he had caught a lot of flack for probably being a little bit too loyal to players that served him so well, which I get. But you also have to give credit where credit's due, that he's since flipped that script, and obviously it's yielding dividends at this point. So I think the new signings in particular, I had high hopes for their City careers. I did not have high hopes for this season. I just didn't think it was realistic to expect much out of them. And it's funny, I'm thinking in particular of Nico and Kusanov, the criticisms that were attributed to them when the move was made of, hey, these are the things you have to look out for. And, with Nico, it was, oh, well, he can be an 8 and he probably won't hold this position. Well, 90% of the time that hasn't been the case. With Kusanov, it was, he's going to use his pace too much and he's going to go make these runs across the pitch to make a recovery tackle and leave his man behind. That hasn't happened. His reading of the game's been brilliant. So sometimes it's a matter of you just have to wait and see. And in City's case, they've lucked out and that it's benefited them. And we haven't even talked about Vitor Heisz because he hasn't played, but we may be on Sunday's review saying, here's another gem that City have signed. So I think there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic for, again, the next few months, but also the next few years and maybe even a decade.
That was the first part of the show. If you want more, make sure to check the City Ramble wherever you get your podcasts from.